If you watch the premiere of Worth the Wait, you know that I posted the wrong ending, the part with the charts, and Kitty pointed that out to me. And so this is the ending that was supposed to be there with the added information, and I think it makes it a little clearer to read the charts with all the nice little arrows and the other pictures and everything. In any case, here you go. Here's the correction to Worth the Wait. What I've done is I've prepared two more slides that compare the 24 knives of the slideshow to the Victorinox Tinker and the Rough Rider Camp King. Each slide has the weight of the Victorinox Tinker and the Rough Rider Camp King at the top, and then 12 of the knives that were shown in the slideshow will appear underneath those two knives. So you can compare those weights to the other knives. The first column identifies the knife. The second column identifies the weight of the knife. The third column shows the difference of the knife's weight compared to the tinker, and then the fourth column shows the difference of the knife's weight compared to the Rough Rider Camp King. And finally, the knives are color coded. So, for instance, if the color in the column shows up as peach, then that's how much the knife outweighs the other knife. So, for instance, the Rough Rider Camp King outweighs the Tinker by 55.6 grams. However, the Imperial Camp King only outweighs the Tinker by 15.5 grams. And next you see the columns that are in green. And in this case, it's how much less the knife weighs compared to the other knife. So in the case of the Tinker, it is 55.6 grams less than the Camp King. However, the Victorinox Spartan is 1.7 grams less than the Tinker. So it is also 57.3 grams less than the Camp King. So the Victorinox Spartan weighs less than either the Tinker or the Rough Rider Camp King, just as the Remington Trailhand outweighs both the Tinker and the Rough Rider Camp King. Moving on to slide 2, you see the Tinker and the Camp King once again at the top, plus 12 knives underneath. Now, in the case of these knives, many of these are actually four-blade camp knives, the ones with the main blade, the can opener, the cap lifter, and the punch, similar to what you have on the Rough Rider Camp King. And the reason I did that is I wanted to show you that despite several knives being basically your four-blade scout knife, they also will come in at different weights depending on who made them. And several of these are Boy Scout knives. And we have the Chinese-made Boy Scout knife, the Baron's Son Boy Scout knife, and the Ulster Boy Scout knives. And you see that all of them outweigh the Tinker, but by different amounts, and all of them are less weight than the Rough Rider Camp King. I also went ahead and looked at the Camillus 99 camp knife, which is readily available, and you see that it weighs differently too. What really struck me as odd is the weight of the Baron's Son Boy Scout knife, which has Delrin handles that are similar to the Ulster and the Camillus knife, yet it is substantially heavier because stainless steel is used throughout. Whereas the Ulster Boy Scout knife and the Camillus 99 camp knife have brass liners and such, so that is why they weigh less than the much heavier Berenson knife. But you notice also the China knife that uses bone handles still comes in at less than the Camilla's 99, and that's because the blades are thinner on that Chinese-made Boy Scout camp knife. I decided to also go ahead and weigh the China Deluxe BSA and the Camilla's Deluxe BSA knives. These are the basically the 5-tool Boy Scout knives that have the end-mounted Phillips driver. And the reason I added those into this mix is simply because they're more comparable to the Victorinox Tinker in their tool set. I also decided to weigh the Case Scout Junior with the jig bone handles, and that was primarily because I wanted to compare that to the Rough Rider Camp King. The two knives have nearly identical tool sets. However, the Case Scout Junior is built on a 3 3/8 inch frame versus a 3 3/4 inch frame. So all of the tools are smaller, still just as functional, but smaller and much lighter, as you can tell. And I also decided to weigh some common Victorinox knives that are often carried as EDCs, particularly the Victorinox 84 millimeter Walker and the 91 millimeter Compact. Now, both the Walker and the Compact replace the can opener and the cap lifters found on the Victorinox Tinker with a combination tool, and they put that combination tool in place of the small pin blade, which allows the knives to eliminate an entire layer of the knife. Of course, part of that means that you have lost a pin blade, but otherwise the functionality is about the same. The screwdriver on the combination tool can sort of work as a Phillips driver, but it's not as nearly as effective as the Phillips driver on the Tinker. And neither the Walker or the Compact has an awl with a sewing eye. However, the Walker has a wood saw and the Compact has a pair of small scissors. And the Compact also has the all-purpose hook with a nail file built into it, and it also comes with an ink pen because it has plus scales. So that's why these knives are popular. And you can see the weight differences between those and the Tinker and the Rough Rider Camp King. And then you see the difference between the Victorinox 108 millimeter German Army knife and the Victorinox 111 millimeter German Army knife, both of which I feel are more useful than either the Tinker or the Rough Rider Camp King. And here you can see the weight differences between those. And for somebody who would be in the outdoors, needing things like a wood saw and such, perhaps that 111 millimeter German Army knife would make more sense than either of these knives despite the weight. And finally, the Victorinox Explorer with the plus scales is the knife that I typically carry all the time. And as you can see, it weighs more than the Tinker, but it also has a lot more uses than the Tinker does. And yet it still weighs less than the Rough Rider Camp King. Now, going back to slide one, I also want to point out a few things here in things like the Victorinox Fieldmaster. Obviously, it weighs substantially more than the Tinker at 38.6 grams, but it is still less than the Camp King, and it's about the same size as the Camp King, as I mentioned in the video. However, while it weighs more than the Tinker, it has many more uses than the Tinker in that it has a pair of scissors with it as well as a wood saw, which makes a big difference if it's something that you're using while camping or something. Perhaps it's not your choice for an everyday carry, but that really depends on what you commonly need day to day. So that's one of the reasons why these 4 and 5 layer Victorinox knives still get everyday use by certain people because they are still relatively compact and relatively light. Not as light as a Tinker, but lighter than other pocket knives of about the same size. I also found it kind of interesting that the Victorinox Spartan, and I weighed numerous Tinkers and numerous Spartans, and in general, the the Spartan tends to be about 1.5 grams lighter than the Tinker on average. And it basically comes down to the fact that the Spartan has a corkscrew instead of the Phillips driver. But what really surprised me was the weight of the Wenger Evo 10 and the Wenger Commander. Now, the Commander was a knife that was made back in the 1960s. The Wenger Evo 10 is a much newer knife made sometime after 2010. And you notice the weight differences. And these knives have basically the same tools as the Victorinox Spartan, except they're built on an 85 millimeter frame, so it's a smaller knife, and it has a nail file instead of a small blade. But obviously a lighter weight knife than the Tinker. Well, the Wenger Evo 10 was lighter than the Tinker. The Commander is obviously heavier, but that's because it's a much earlier made knife from the 1960s with thicker liners in it and a solid Celador scale to it. Plus, you have that bail on there instead of the key ring. All of that adds to the weight. So even though it is a smaller knife, 85 millimeters versus 91 millimeters, it is still heavier than the Tinker. And I'm sure a lot of people notice the weight differences with the Imperial Camp King versus the Rough Rider Camp King. And that's basically the difference between a hollow shell handle and a bone handle with the nickel silver bolsters. But then we also can see here with several of the other knives here with the Victorinox Pioneer and the Pioneer X, definitely heavier than the Tinker and not nearly as many tools as the Tinker, but that's because of the A-lock scales, but still substantially less weight than the Rough Rider Camp King. And the same thing with the Camillus military knife or the demo knife. What kind of surprised me was the difference in weight between the Camillus demo knife and the Marbles GI knife, which is a copy of the Camillus demo knife. And notice it is actually heavier. The Remington Trail Hand has all the tools that you would find on the Tinker, minus the toothpick and the tweezers, but notice the substantial weight differences between the two, as it actually outweighs the Rough Rider Camp King even, and that is with Delrin handles. And finally, I threw in that Coleman camp utensil set, or the take apart hobo knife, because I was just curious on where it would come out in the weight. And interesting enough, it's pretty much right in the middle between the Tinker and the Camp King. Okay, I guess that pretty much wraps this up. I hope you found it useful. It was a little tedious putting together, but I kind of enjoyed doing it also. And it was at least to me, it was interesting to see the weight differences between a variety of camp knives. And well, let me know if this is something that you found useful or not, and if you'd like to see this done with other knives. Other varieties of knives, just to see, how they stack up against each other. Obviously, it should be knives that serve a similar purpose. In the case of this, I thought it was interesting to see the way different, you know, camp utility scout kind of knives compare in weight. In any case, thanks for watching, and let me know what you think.
Thanks again for dropping by here at Knife Chats with Tobias. I'm Tobias. Kitty here's the production staff. We both want to thank you very much for dropping by and spending a little time with us. We really do appreciate it. And don't forget, if you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Kitty loves to hear that bell. And share it with your friends. Kitty loves it when you share. Talk to you again soon. Right, Kitty?